Hello everybody. Today in this video I'm going to be talking about the Dragonfly and more broadly Gravlev vehicles as a whole. Now before we get started, I do want to say I know that ground vehicles are not a priority right now, but I still wanted to give my feedback and input on them because eventually they're going to get worked on in the future, right? So my opinion of the Gravlev vehicles is they're good and they're a ton of fun, but they're still not great. And I think they're pretty close to being great. And with a few changes, they could be like amazing ground vehicles within Star Citizen. One area I think they fall short of the other ground vehicles is they're difficult to get in and out of ships. So typically, if I want to fly around on one, I'll just fly to a place and spawn it because I don't want to deal with having to load and unload it. Something CIG could do to alleviate this would be to give control over the Gravlev hover height. And I don't mean just give us access to like the thrusters for the strafe up and down direction, but actually change the height of the Gravlev technology. The other thing I think that would improve the Gravlev experience overall would be give us some pitch control. So I've ridden motorcycles for about 8 or 9 years now, and I can tell you I have more pitch control on a motorcycle than I do on a Dragonfly and Star Citizen. Even if we just had a few degrees of pitch control, it would make navigating hilly terrain much easier. It would make navigating over obstacles much easier. I do think it would add another layer of skill, so inexperienced people might crash if you give them pitch control. So maybe what you do is you add pitch control and like roll in a higher top speed to some sort of advanced mode, similar to the way that like Segway does the different keys. Like when you rent a Segway, there's a green key, a yellow key, and a red key. And usually they don't give you the red key, but the red key is the fun key. Give us the red key for the Dragonfly. So I know an advanced mode is a long shot, but I do think just height control and pitch control would go a long way with fixing the Dragonfly's current issues. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the weight of the Dragonfly. So on the website it says it weighs about 2,000 kilograms, which is 4,500 pounds approximately. So to put that in perspective, a Honda Civic weighs 1,093 kilograms or 2,400 pounds. So a Dragonfly is like 2 Honda Civics flying around. Or in motorcycles, it's about 9 CBR 600RRs, which are like a race motorcycle. So I mean, just looking at the Dragonfly or any other Gravlevs, I think they might be a little overweight, and I don't know if they need to be that weight for the physics engine. I'm not a game developer, obviously, so I don't know why they're so heavy, but it's definitely something to think about, because when you look at like the amount of force required to make them do the maneuvers they can do in space, if you just reduce the weight, it would make the numbers more believable. So for instance, in space, a Dragonfly can pull 2.2 Gs, which is an acceleration of about 21 meters per second. And with a weight of 2,000 kilograms, it's generating 42,000 newtons of force to pull those 2.2 Gs, which just seems like an awfully large amount for a vehicle of its size. So one thing I see discussed often in relation to Gravlev vehicles is whether or not they should be able to fly. And my perspective on it is, why not both? For instance, it makes more sense that a Dragonfly would be able to take off from a moon than it does if they were able to take off from a planet. I'm going to give you some rough numbers here. The Dragonfly in space, like I said before, can pull 2.2 Gs strafing up. And even with, if you were going to say, okay, there's thruster efficiency curves and blah, 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 and you're only getting half that, that's still 1.1G, and it should probably be able to at least barely fly on the surface of Hurston or the surface of Microtech. But on a moon, like, come on, that thing should be able to blast off like a fucking rocket. So what I think they should do is maybe rebalance all those different strafe directions and even your forward thrust so that it's not possible to fly on the surface of planets with thick atmospheres, but you would still retain the thruster inputs so that you could glide in a certain sort of way, so that just when you go off like a rock that's at a slightly angle, you don't just slam back into the ground. That you still have the ability to control your craft in the air, even though you're going to be descending. But then also, it's like on a moon that has like a half the gravity or less than half the gravity, it doesn't really make sense that you can't fly. It like really doesn't. I think this is one of the reasons we don't have pitch control on the Gravlev vehicles right now, is because it would make it possible to take off from moons. So I do have one more idea. It's a little bit more of a long shot than pitch control or height control. It has to do with like the way that the Gravlev interacts with the world. And I drew up a little diagram, and I'll show you that right here. So the idea that I had, and it's probably not a new idea, it might have already been discussed, is essentially treat the Gravlev like a regular maneuvering thruster as far as letting it provide forward, left, right, and upward forces, and then basically give it a max thrust based on how close it is to either the ground or other objects. The reason I think this would be a good solution is it would allow the maneuvering thrusters on the Dragonfly to be nerfed by a pretty big margin, which would help with the ability not to fly, but you would still be able to retain the same amount of acceleration, or possibly get more acceleration by lowering yourself to the ground and then getting more force that way. I think this would also help with the illusion of speed. And what I mean by the illusion of speed is, I've noticed that a lot of people complain that the Dragonflies aren't fast, and it's not that they're slow. They fly about 90 miles an hour. But it's the perception, because the higher up you are, obviously, you have to go faster to get the perception of speed. And if you're a motorcycle rider, you'll know that carving through a canyon at 50 kilometers an hour feels fast, and so does going on a straightaway at 220 kilometers an hour. And what I think this change would do is it would allow you to hug the ground and be super agile and super maneuverable, and it would feel fast in that sense, but it would also allow you to float up and accelerate slower, but it ultimately achieve a higher top speed safely. That pretty much sums up my opinions and thoughts about Gravlev inside Star Citizen. I do have one question for you. Do you think that Gravlev vehicles should be able to fly over water? I don't really have an opinion on it either one way or another. I do think it would add some cool possible gameplay opportunities, although I do understand that if they want to add boats, it might create some sort of balance issue. Anyways, I appreciate you watching, and have a good one.